In Scotland on Thursday. That's tomorrow? No, day after tomorrow. Today's Tuesday. Yeah. Scotland, I never know what day of the week it is. Scotland, I believe it's on Thursday. They're holding a national referendum, a vote, on whether they should separate from the United Kingdom and be their own country. And John Nichols is over there from Edinburgh, Scotland, reporting on this for The Nation. He's the Washington correspondent for The Nation. TheNation.com is the website. Hey, John, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Tom, it's great to be on with you. I hope our connection is good.
Yeah, it's just fine. It's just fine. So what's your sense of what's going on over there?
Well, it's something huge, Tom. In fact, if there wasn't so much going on in the States, I would have made you come with me. This is everything that you've been talking about and that you've been fascinated by for so many years. Scotland is in the midst of a great debate about self-determination, about whether they will govern their own affairs or be governed from London. Now, people can take different stands on that issue, but I cannot emphasize to you, I have covered elections all over the world. I've covered all sorts of politics in all sorts of settings. I've never been someplace where democracy was so fully engaged. You can't walk down the street. You cannot go into a shop. You can't go anywhere where people aren't having deep, serious debates about the future of their country and the future of their lives. It's a pretty remarkable thing.
It's been 300 years in the coming, though.
Yes, it has been. And there are no guarantees that it will result in an independent state. The polls show that it's razor thin. There's been an intense campaign, but it is so very different from in the United States. People really should be paying attention to this.
Yeah.
If you can imagine it, Tom, voter registration is at 97%.
And they don't, unlike Australia, they don't have required voter registration.
This is voluntary, and they have already had something like, in a country where there are 4.2 million voters, they have already had something like 700,000 cast postal ballots. So there's just an intense level of engagement here. There is talk that turnout could be 85, 87%. They have done some remarkable things, all of which go to sort of the most idealistic discussions in the United States about democracy. They have expanded the electorate, including 16 and 17-year-olds, on the argument that this is their future that's being voted on. They have had an incredible level of debates, regular debates on television, but also in town halls across Scotland. They have had a massive mobilization for people to come and vote. And beyond that, they've had this intensive discussion about the future, about whether a small country is better able to govern itself and better able to function, how they would relate to other countries, but also about austerity. And I would emphasize to you that if you want to understand what this Scottish referendum is about, it is about a sense on the part of a great many Scots that if they governed their own affairs, they would not have to buy into the austerity politics, cuts, and assaults on unions, other issues that we've talked about so often that you see in the United States and in Britain.
Yeah. Paul Krugman wrote I thought, very insightful column a few weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, in which he pointed out that if Scotland separates from the UK, but they continue to use the British pound as their currency, they're going to find themselves in the same awful position that Greece and Spain and Portugal and Ireland find themselves in with regard to the EU. They will not have control over their economic future, or at least their financial future, and that could be a real disaster. Is there much conversation about coming up with a separate Scottish currency, or is the broad consensus, yeah, we'll become independent, but we'll continue to use the pound?
There's a great discussion about everything being up for grabs, and potentially about using the pound, but also potentially about using the euro. And one thing to understand, Tom, and while I have great respect for Paul Krugman, I have some challenge to his column. I agree with Joseph Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, who has argued that the opposite of Krugman and said that Scotland is in an incredibly good position to set up a system, an economic system, where they can avoid austerity. Now, you are right to bring up the currency issues. One thing to understand, however, is that Scotland is a much wealthier country by many, many measures, at least proportionally, to some of the other places that you've mentioned. And so as a result, if they have control of their own affairs, they have the potential, not the certainty, because you're right about all the complexities of a global economy, but they have the potential to steer their way through this. And the truth of the matter is that the discussion here in Scotland is exactly about issues like that. It's very, very serious. When you walk down the street, when you go to a meeting, and I was at a remarkable meeting last night, a couple of them with Tariq Ali, the great campaigner from Britain, which is for Pakistan, who was up here for this, saying it's the most engaged, small d democratic experience he's had in many years. The discussions go deep. They're very, very serious, and they go to the heart of a bigger question, Tom, and that is, in a globalized economy where you have very, very big countries that seem to be surprisingly dysfunctional, surprisingly incapable of governing themselves, and always in sort of a stuck in the middle situation without being able to go one way or the other. Scotland doesn't want to be that, or at least a lot of Scots don't want to be that. They actually want to have a country that is forward-looking, that is progressive. What they say, what the Scots who favor independence say, is they want a fairer, more modern Scotland. And they believe that as a small country they can do that. When they look for a model, they look to places like Norway, rather than buying into the notion that they would have to necessarily be an economic basket case or be in some sort of difficult situation.
Right. What's your sense of which way this is going to go?
Boy, it's the worst thing in the world to be an American journalist telling people what's going to happen on the ground in their country. And so I get asked that all the time here, which is quite funny.
Well, what are the pundits there saying?
Well, the pundits here think it's an even split. I think that there is, if you had to bet money, there's probably a marginal sense that it might go no. Remember, declaring independence via the ballot is a pretty big deal. It's something that happens rarely. And so even with all of the excitement about it, there's certainly a lot of people that are skeptical. David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, has been here aggressively campaigning, effectively begging the Scots to stay in the United Kingdom. So I think it will be very, very close. But I can tell you that if it fails even narrowly, this will change the politics, not just of Scotland, but of Britain. This is
I'm curious. We just have a minute left, John. I'm curious what this is doing to Northern Ireland and Wales, to other traditionally independent countries.
Well, they're very different, obviously, but the Welsh are watching this incredibly closely. They have been here. Welsh nationalists have been in Scotland and are very interested in what happens. What I can tell you is this. If Scotland does vote yes, and that is certainly a possibility if you look at the polls, then Wales will immediately ask for a much greater level of autonomy. And that is not just the Welsh nationalists, but even the Welsh Labour Party will become very aggressive in that demand, and they'll probably get it. One thing to understand is this has shaken Britain to its roots. I mean, all of the leaders of Britain have canceled other activities. They've come en masse to Scotland to beg Scotland to stay. And certainly, if Scotland votes to go, they're going to be very, very determined to try and keep Northern Ireland and Wales as a part of the United Kingdom, or as a part of Great Britain.
Right. Fascinating stuff. John Nichols, live from Edinburgh, Scotland, Washington correspondent for The Nation magazine, thenation.com. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Tom. I'm glad we're talking about this.
And me too. Keep up the great reporting.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.